High school can be tough. We'll help you navigate some of the areas you need help with, including the college preparation process, by providing advice for families. Every student is different and has a unique path. That's why we created this podcast. Our innovative and intentional approach builds confidence in the individual student. Listen each week to find out how students can score better on college placement tests with techniques and methods that build confidence, beat test anxiety, and identify strengths within each student. You're listening to Simply Smarter with hosts Caleb and Jill. Check out our blog at GetSmarterPrep.com for more college prep-related topics.
Welcome back. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for listening to our Simply Smarter podcast this week. Today we have a special guest joining us, our very own college counselor and tutor, Alana Guerin. Alana is going to share what it takes to make a great college essay, give us some tips for preparing college lists, and how she can help with the college admissions process. Let's get started.
Hey, Jill.
Hi, Lana. How are you?
I am great, thank you.
Good. It's so good to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here. This is my first time on the radio, so
Yes.
very exciting.
Awesome. Welcome to the podcast life.
Yay.
Wonderful. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been with Get Smarter Prep as a tutor for about a month, so one of our newest tutors, but you do have a little bit of college counseling background. So kind of tell us where you came from, and we can kind of start from there.
I do have some college counseling background. I am married to a guy who's in the military, which means that we move around a lot.
Awesome.
And so the different types of jobs I've had in different places I've been a public high school English teacher. I've worked at actually a company a lot like Get Smarter, but in New York, where I did some college counseling and helped students with their essays and helped them apply to college, sort of similar to the stuff I'm doing here.
Right.
I taught at a college, and it was actually a junior college where we had a lot of students who were applying out to four-year colleges. So I was used to helping them prepare their transfer applications and advising them on where they should be going as well. So that was sort of like the extension of the college counseling I did for 12th graders, only for 2 years later.
Right.
And then now we're here, and so I was looking for sort of a similar situation, and I really like working with teenagers and helping them work on their essays and helping them talk about themselves in an interesting way. So this seemed like, a pretty cool place to be working.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your service and your husband's service and
Thank you.
everything that you and your husband have done for our country. That's awesome.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that. And we're glad you're here in Kansas City.
We like it so far. It's very cool.
I was going to say, what's the best part about Kansas City so far?
There's so many good places to eat here. Literally, our last town did not have very many exciting places to eat, which is such a minor thing. But we go into the plaza and we're like, oh my gosh, there's so many exciting restaurants here.
There are. There really are.
Literally having so many tasty options.
Yeah.
Like
if you're a foodie,
we're big foodies.
come to Kansas City for sure.
Super duper exciting, and like lots of also nice local types of produce and stuff like that. So, which is great for me. My husband's a big carnivore, but
nice.
yeah, which we have barbecue
Works
here.
out for him too.
Exactly.
Yes,
so
yeah.
So yeah, we've been having actually just a lot of fun exploring Kansas City restaurants.
Yeah, I love that.
That's been our jam.
That's awesome. So we were watching Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, Triple D. last
do they
night.
have a lot of Kansas options there?
They do. Ooh. So this was, I didn't know, I don't know, I think they're in their 25th season or something with this show. But they had one here in Kansas City, which I was like, oh great, there's a new one. This is awesome. It's a new season. And it was a taco place down at the River Market. I love tacos.
I also love tacos. And I actually haven't been to the River Market yet. This is one of these places I keep driving around it, but not through it. And I think I have to get there. I hear there's some really amazing donuts also in the River Market.
Oh,
it's
I haven't
a
been.
rumor that there are some donuts that I have to be checking out of the River
Market.
Market.
I know there's quite a few donut places in the area.
Everyone said if you go to Kansas, you need to find your local donut place. But apparently there's some stall. I got to find out more about this. But apparently the River Market has some donuts that I guess will not have lived until I've tried.
Okay.
So, good to know.
Well, also, I know there's a really good ice cream place down there, Betty Ray's.
Yes.
I haven't been, but I've also heard.
Amazing.
So, yes, and Alana is pregnant with her first child.
So very focused on snacks right now. Exactly. The pregnant lady always wants a snack.
Yes, if we keep on talking about food, I will just go, I'm not not pregnant, but I will join her in the fun of talking about
snacks
food,
are
so.
delicious anytime. That's a given.
True. So true. Well, welcome back to Kansas City.
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
So we're just so excited to have you. Now that we know a little bit about your background, let's kind of dive into the college admissions process. What do students need to know overall?
So I think that what you really need to be thinking about overall is a place that's going to be a good fit for you. And that's sort of complicated. Students receive a lot of very conflicting messages. First of all, go to the place that, the best place that will accept you based on your SAT scores and your grades. Mm-hmm. And that isn't necessarily the place you're going to be happiest or the place that's going to, have a department that's, got a major that you're interested in or where you're going to really feel like you're finding a community. There's just, there's a lot of factors, and ultimately your college choice should make you happy because ideally you're going to be spending 3 to 4 years there. Mm-hmm. So that isn't necessarily the most competitive. Obviously, affordability is also going to be a factor in that, and that gets to be a whole other confusing variable. And I think just trying to sort out like the mess of, confusing factors. How far do I want to go? How expensive can I afford? Mm-hmm. What kind of school is going to be good for me? Where's going to have my major? What's, going to be the best quality school? Trying to sort of have a matrix of all those factors can be so confusing for kids.
Right. So how do students start? I mean, what are we going to look for? So what do we go through the region first? Start at the region. Do I want to be on the coast? Do I want to be in the Midwest?
Yeah, starting with the region is a great plan. And, some people really, it's important to them to stay local, to stay close to the family. Some people are like, get me out of Dodge. I want to go to California. I want to go to New York. They want to try, to flex their wings and, go to some kind of different place. So probably the region is a great place to start. Yeah. You also want to think about the size of the campus. Like, do you want like a giant 50,000 person campus that's probably a university, it has grad students, has big sports? Or do you want like a small kind of warm, close-knit liberal arts college, where you're going to like know a lot of your professors, and some places call them by their first names, really,
more
intimate.
That one-on-one connection.
Yeah. And that can definitely also give you like a different sense of like, wow, these are the types of schools that I should be applying to. And then, of course, you've also got to think, what do I ultimately want to get out of this college experience? What kind of school will have the types of courses I want to be taking, let alone the major, but even like the types of courses. There are schools that offer courses where there will be a maximum of 12 people, and you are always, with, a professor who is a PhD in their field already. And,
really cool.
And then there are also schools where you're going to, and this works for some people and not for other people, where most of your beginning courses, at least in year 1 or 2, are going to be 150 people, possibly taught by ITA. And like, that's a question of, does it work for you? Does it not work for you? Those are all things you got to consider.
What works for you, Ilana? What worked for you?
So I did not know what I was doing when I was applying to college. This is, many moons ago. And I was like all over the map. I had big schools, small schools, state schools, private colleges. And my dad had this idea. He'd gotten a brochure from Barnard College, which is a women's college in New York City. It's one of the original Seven Sisters.
Yes, I've heard of it.
And I think my dad was like, oh man, women's college. This is like going to be great, elite, she'll stay out of trouble. Like it's a great situation, And, but he actually had a really correct idea on this, because it was, it was a very sort of small, intimate setting, real small classes. I knew all the professors in any department where I took the classes.
I think that's really important.
It was so nice for me. And like, it enabled me to really build these relationships with these professors that I think as a 17-year-old, I didn't have this appreciation of how much I would enjoy that. Yeah. But then once I was there, I was like, man, Dad was really onto something. Like, I love knowing I have this professor now. I'm going to take this one next semester, and she's really cool. And I already talked to her, and it's awesome. And if I have a problem, I can come, barging into their office, and they'll talk to me about it, which was amazing.
Yeah, and they have life experience.
Yes.
You trust them.
And I got tons of guidance, like really that I think I wouldn't have gotten if I'd been at this giant school where, I'd have been 1 in 200. And at the same time, for some courses, the beginning is usually like a big lecture, like Introduction to Sociology. And because the school is ensconced in the Columbia University campus, and there's also a School of Engineering right by there, it meant that there were really 3 undergraduate classes all taking, courses at each other's campuses. So one year I guess it was like the entire football team for some reason was taking sociology together in my introduction to sociology class.
Massive men.
there was like a row of them. They were really massive, and they were, near the front row, and they often had very good questions and like entertaining observations. And just, for some reason, the entire football team was taking sociology at Barnard. And then, there was another class where I think it was a philosophy class that I took over at Columbia, and for some reason, I think a lot of engineers needed that for their distribution requirements. And so I had a class loaded with engineers that I became very good friends with. And it was just like such a nice setting because it gave me the benefits of this really small, warm, I want to say, like really warm, liberal arts college, while at the same time having advantages of a huge university. And that was, awesome. So Dad really, he was on the money on that one, though. At the time I was like, Dad, why are you so into this school? It's just because they sent a really glossy brochure, but he knew. So,
hey, it's all about the marketing, I tell you.
It was. And, truthfully, like I couldn't overrule him because I didn't even have that good an idea of where I wanted to go. There wasn't a school where I was like, oh, I really love this school. I was kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
So when Dad sort of nudged me in that direction, man, did it turn out he was right.
And that's sometimes all you need, a gentle nudge in the right direction.
It's like, man, good job, Dad.
Yep.
I remember he was like, if I were an 18-year-old girl, I would go to Barnard. I was like, Dad, that's really weird.
Well, you're not, Dad. So
thanks for saying that. But he was absolutely correct on that.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. I'm glad he nudged you in that direction. Going back to what colleges are looking for, more towards an essay. So we're talking about still the college application process. What are colleges looking for in an essay?
So I have these 4 rules of essays that I actually think are pretty good rules for life as well. Because basically there's rules of what you do at a party. All right. So say you're going to a party, and this isn't a party with all your best friends. This is a party where maybe you know the host, but you don't know that many people very well. So you're there, you want to kind of meet people.
Right.
The first thing is you want to be yourself, always come off in like a very genuine way. And that is absolutely true for colleges as well. I think especially the admissions officers at this point can really sniff out, disingenuous types of essays where the student is just trying to tell them what they want to hear. And you don't want to do that. You want to be yourself.
Or just use a lot of big words. Just because you're using big words doesn't mean it's a good story.
Exactly. It doesn't mean it's a good story at all. Or I think a lot of kids think for some reason you have to talk about your community service. And it's great if you did community service that you really want to talk about, but that isn't the only thing that you have to talk about.
Right.
You want to talk about something that is very much you, that represents you, that's important to you and interesting to you. And then you'll convey that interest to somebody else.
Something you're passionate about.
The second thing is you want to have a good story. When you're at a party, you always want to be able to tell a good story, make people laugh. That's how, that AJR song, 100 bad days make 100 good stories. 100 good stories make me interesting at parties. That's 100% the same rule with colleges. Only you really want to pick one good story.
Good application.
Oh, yeah, exactly. 100 would be too many. But you want to pick a good story and have it be entertaining. Everyone likes a good story. And remember, the college admissions officers are reading
how many?
Zillions of these essays. You want yours to stand out by being a nice, entertaining story.
Yeah.
So that's part 2. Part 3 is a little bit tricky. It's great if you can be funny. Nobody ever, lost admission by making an admissions officer laugh.
Right.
Now, that is something you want to always be thoughtful about because you don't want to be off color.
Right.
You don't want to be inappropriate.
Be careful.
Yeah. Stuff that's funny with your friends is not necessarily going to be the same thing that an adult admissions officer is going to find funny.
Yes.
So you have to be careful of that. But
you never know who's reading it.
You never do. But situational things that are funny, self-deprecating humor tends to be sometimes very amusing because it shows that you have humility and you can laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
Just sort of oh, look at this odd thing that happened. Funny in a way that is not, maybe so controversial,
right,
is great. And if you can make an admissions officer laugh, they love that.
Yes.
So that's fantastic. So don't be afraid to be funny.
That's a really good point. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, and you don't have to be so serious.
Right.
There's no requirement for that.
Because I feel like the essays, the essay portion of the college admission process is so serious. I mean,
it is.
And students put a lot of, just a lot of pressure on themselves to create this very perfect, 100% perfect essay. And yes, of course you want to do a great essay. But like you said, you want to have a story. You want to make it personal. You want it to be funny.
Yeah, and there's at this, it's weird because you have to strike a balance between being formal and informal.
Right.
And it's kind of hard to do that because on the one hand, you want it to be, it's not like you're texting your friends here. You want it to be an essay. It really is an essay. And on the other hand, you want it to sound like a human being is writing it. You don't
Yes.
want it to be like mechanical and boring and flat. And, you want it to have this like sort of like, personal aspect to it. So definitely being funny if you can like manage to do it in an appropriate way, and don't feel pressured to be if you're not feeling like what you're talking about is funny, but it's great if you can.
Right.
And then the fourth thing is you want to be careful. Obviously at a party that has different applications than in an essay, but this is really crucial to keep in mind because people don't keep in mind word limits. Okay. If the college says 500 words, or if it's the common application and it says 650, don't like shoot beyond that. That's not, you want to be mindful of what the directions are. You also absolutely want to keep in mind things like grammar, things like punctuation. Make sure it is proofread and edited 100 times over before you're sending it out. You cannot have sloppy mistakes in that essay.
No, absolutely not.
That's your one chance to make a first impression, and it's really the only impression.
Yep.
So you want to make sure that that essay is very polished and ready to go by the time it's seeing any admissions officers.
So who's the best person to edit an essay? Maybe a parent, another student, a friend.
So that's a thing that is confusing, I think, to a lot of kids. Your parents, obviously, maybe you have a parent who's great at English, and that's awesome. You're like, wow, like mom's a really good writer. I should totally have her edit it. The problem with having people who are related to you edit your essays, and I think that this is probably true of your parents and your siblings and probably, cousins and people as well, is that they love you, first of all.
Yes.
And so they're not maybe necessarily inclined to be as, kind of to read it with a critical eye that you need for a college essay.
As objective as maybe
they're not
someone
as
else
objective.
would be.
Exactly.
Say a college counselor.
The other thing is they know you. When you are making a funny remark, they can imagine it in your voice. And so they imagine you saying it, but you've got to have this essay read for someone who does not know you.
Right.
Who's got to be able to have your personality come through without already having the benefit of having known you for 18 years.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So you want someone who's really, really objective. Sometimes a teacher can be a good person for this. Just keep in mind that your English teacher is probably going to be inundated with essays from loads and loads of people. So you want to, if you're absolutely keen that your English teacher has to be the one to look at this, make sure you're getting to them very, very early in the year.
Maybe
not
for
like
the favorite student.
Yes. and you're not doing this like, 2 days before it's due, which is a lot of pressure to put on your teacher and really not cool.
You have to be mindful of that.
You do. And that they obviously have a lot of other students probably making the same requests. Some people are like, oh, my friend's a really good writer. And it's great if you can have a friend give it another pair of eyes, but that should not be your final person, because they're, this person is the same age as you are and also applying to college and probably does not have, a much stronger understanding of what the college admissions officers are looking for or how they're going to read it than you do, just because you guys are kind of in the same demographic.
Right. And they may not catch all the grammatical errors as
They may not, exactly. Even a really proficient friend, again, this is the curse of knowing someone really well. You hear what you expect to hear, you see what you expect to see, you hear it in their voice, and it makes it harder to catch essays. It's also why we can't read our own writing very, very well.
Yeah,
because we read exactly what we expect to and we can't catch our own mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. What's the biggest mistake students make when writing their own essays?
So first of all, really those grammatical errors and not following the directions. You'd be amazed how many people just submit kind of sloppy work and just don't bother to take the time to correct it.
To me.
Which is ridiculous, because this is your chance to make a first impression on someone who might accept you to college, possibly give you a scholarship. You've got to take the time
100%
to do it in a good way. Also, essays that I think don't succeed well. First of all, stories that too much reflect what's already in your transcript. Like if you have your list of activities in your transcript, your essay should not be redundant about that.
Right.
If there's one of the activities you really want to talk about, and in fact, some questions will ask you talk about an activity on your transcript, then absolutely you talk about that. But your essay should not be just like an overview of something that they're already understanding from your transcript.
Well, that's boring.
It is. It's super boring. And it's not telling the admissions officers anything interesting about you as a person.
Yeah. Or nothing new.
Yeah. Or what you're going to contribute to their college or anything like that. It's not giving you like a sense of personality. Also, I want to say like essays that are sort of too self-flattering are very unattractive to the college admissions officers. I've read essays before where students will refer to themselves as being virtuous or, like I'm a very generous person or I'm a very high achieving student.
Also a very humble person.
Also very humble, yes.
I'm very, very humble.
I'm a humble genius, yes. And it may absolutely be true. You may be the most humble genius who has ever, crossed their campus before, but you do not.
I'm going to write about it.
Yes. These are things that you never want to say about yourself in a college essay, even if they're true. Your humility and the fact that you're a good student will come through in your essays, in your transcript, without you needing to tell the colleges anything like that.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, so don't tell them what a genius you are, and don't tell them how humble you are. This is not a good way to start with the admissions officers.
I feel like that's self-explanatory, but I guess you really do have to put it out there.
It totally would be, and yet, there are a lot of kids who, and totally mean well, and it's understandable. You're a kid, you're applying to college, you want to put your best foot forward. You want the college to know you're humble and a genius. Absolutely.
That's where you have the editing involved. Maybe get someone that's not a parent.
Yes, exactly. Because your parent is like, you are a humble genius.
You are amazing. You are. You're the best. You're the best
most
student ever.
Awesome student. Exactly. Right. So yeah, you don't want to be so self-flattering. If there's something about you that is great, it should come through in the essay without you telling the admissions officers directly.
Yes. So. Okay. So give me an example of a really great essay that you've read before.
So here are two great essays that I really want to talk about for different reasons. One of them was an essay written, I think maybe must have been 5 or 6 years ago, by a student who ended up getting into Cornell University. So quite successful.
Yeah.
And the essay was actually about learning to shoot as a sportsman.
Okay.
So, marksmanship. And this is a topic that obviously could be quite controversial. People have different views about guns, about gun control. It could raise some eyebrows. And he really avoided all of those topics and talked about sort of the self-discipline and respect for life that he had learned through learning to be a marksman.
Right.
So no political or social opinions really came through in the essay. It showed a lot about him as a person, about what sort of things he values, about, how he sees both himself as a sportsman and himself as an outdoorsman, about learning a new skill, which is a skill that probably not a lot of people have, specifically marksmanship.
Right.
And it was just an incredibly interesting and well-written essay that showed this very unique side of this person and also showed that he could be incredibly reflective about something. And, it was something that in the wrong hands, this essay could have been probably, kind of disastrous. If he'd sort of started in one direction or another on a political slant, that could have
neutral.
Really, it could have really alienated some admissions officers depending what their views were. But he kept it very neutral. He kept it about the skill of marksmanship and how this had really, increased his thinking about life and about nature and made him a more mature human being and made him learn to work hard. And it showed a lot about him. And it was a really, really nice and interesting essay, especially because marksmanship is something I certainly didn't know very much about in general. And, hearing him write about it, it really taught me a lot about a sport that I'm extremely unfamiliar with.
Right, exactly.
So that was really, really cool.
That's an Olympic sport as well.
It is, exactly, yeah. And he talked about that in it. And I thought it was so interesting just because, you think guns, you don't necessarily think marksmanship.
Right.
Those aren't the associations.
Not nowadays.
Not nowadays. And he managed to just sort of tread this very fine line where it ended up being interesting and informative and not controversial and actually quite thought-provoking.
And he was it sounds just from what you're talking about, it sounds like he was very passionate about that as well.
He loved marksman. He was a very talented marksman. And that was, a thing that he obviously wanted the colleges to know, but it was really less about, look how great I am, and more about look at how hard it was to learn this skill and how much it's taught me about a bunch of other things you wouldn't even know were connected.
Right.
Which was so interesting.
Did you follow him after that, or was it just an essay that you read?
It was an essay that I read, and I knew he got into Cornell, but I did not keep up with him. I'm sure he did very well there. He was a great writer, but I actually did not know. It would be interesting to
see if he went on to different marksmanship.
That is true. Yeah, maybe he ended up in the Olympics in marksmanship. That's a great question. Yeah, I wish I knew.
Interesting. So if you're out there listening, let us know.
Yes, absolutely. If you are the marksman, please get in touch. Yes. Cause it Get Smarter Prep.
Yes.
So this one actually I have kept in touch with. This was a young man in a high school I taught at in New York City, and he wrote about being the only African American member of the golf team.
Okay.
Which was a sort of, odd thing. It wouldn't necessarily occur to you. But, he said that people have, certain associations with golf and who is playing golf. And he did not necessarily think he was fitting most people's associations. And he talked about, how he felt he was received sometimes when he went to, golf tournaments. Yeah. Being, walking in on this team, being the only African-American student.
Well, they also play on country clubs and very prestigious places.
Exactly. And, assumptions people would make. And I think it would have been a good essay if he had just kept it at that, but what made it masterful was what he did at the end. a lot of the essay was obviously about assumptions people had that were directed at him. And in the wrong hands, that could have come off as sort of sanctimonious even, though it didn't for him. He was a very good writer. But what he did at the end that was so great was he made it about an assumption that he had. So at one point near the end of the essay, you find out he's matched, I guess, against another player who is only written into the roster by this person's initials. It's like, C. Taylor or something like that.
Right.
And it turns out C. Taylor is a girl.
Okay.
Which he was not expecting. Right. And she beats him.
No way.
Yes, he gets roundly beaten by, and he thinks he's, kind of hot stuff.
Yeah.
And then he gets beaten by a girl who is herself another outsider in, a sport where I think she is the only girl on her boys' team. Maybe there was not a girls' golf team at her school. I'm not totally sure what the deal was, but he was obviously not expecting this at all, that C. Taylor would turn out to be a girl.
That's a good twist.
And then C. Taylor turns out to be a girl and roundly beats him, and he's humbled by it. And what was so great about this essay was that it showed not only that he was, aware of perceptions, but that he was aware of his own perceptions.
Right.
And really willing to learn from them.
Yeah.
To think, wow, what preconceived notions have I come in with that, maybe I should be looking to shake up a little bit and challenge. And he was challenged in the end by, someone he did not expect to be meeting on the golf course, who then turned out to be a superior player.
Right.
And it was such an awesome essay because he realized in the course of the essay, wow, all of us have preconceived notions and I need to examine mine just as much as anybody does. And he actually, I have kept in touch with, he went on a full scholarship to NYU.
Wow.
Which was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And now he is a journalism intern at one of the major news publications. And I think he's going to go be a journalist.
Really?
So yeah, he's a really, really awesome kid.
Yeah.
So
And both of those examples of essays are, those are things that they are on the transcript. So I'm a marksman. I play golf.
They are
all things that are on your resume, but they're stories within that have really pulled through.
Absolutely. And that was what was so interesting about them. They aren't just look how great I am at the sport, though both of them obviously were great at the sport. They were stories about things that you can't tell from the transcript. One of them is about this kid, developing respect for life and realizing how hard he has to work to be good at something. Another one is about this kid who realizes just as much as he himself has been subject to preconceived notions, he also has had preconceived notions and has had to, open up his mind about things. And I think that what made both these essays so successful is they both gave the colleges a sense of what the student writing was going to bring to the college in question. Someone who's open-minded, someone who's hardworking, someone who's willing to learn, someone who wants to be friends with peers who are different from them.
Yes.
And who realizes they'll be bringing something different to the table.
Absolutely. 100%.
And those are all things the colleges are yes, bring that to us.
Yep, we want that on our team for sure. What about essays that are really horrible?
I feel oddly, I totally think I wrote this essay in high school. Essays that are so patently obvious, and I hate to keep going back to this, but to your transcript. They're the marching band taught me leadership, camaraderie, and organization. Snooze.
Sorry, I just fell asleep for a moment.
Yes, exactly.
I'm so sorry.
Even hearing about it. So snoozy essays that are redundant from your transcript, that don't bring a character to life. You want to you don't want to be telling the colleges, I learned to put aside my preconceived notions, or I learned to work hard. These essays told that to the colleges without stating it explicitly. The minute you're stating it explicitly, your story is basically going downhill and you're losing everyone. It is boring and weird and sanctimonious, and you don't want to be doing that. You want that story to carry the message.
How many cups of coffee, the whoever reads the essay is I wonder how many cups of coffee they have per day. If
oh my God.
I'm going to read 15 essays per hour, right?
Probably a lot of coffee, because so many of those essays are so criminally boring.
Yes.
And the thing is, I remember doing this myself. So, I'm in no way immune to this. This is one of those, practice, do as I say, not as I do things. I totally wrote something about how being on the swim team taught me, leadership and this and that and the other thing. I mean, and, at the time, I also made the cardinal mistake of having my mom read my essay. Yeah. And then this is how long ago this was.
This is how you learn. This is why
exactly.
she's so good at what she does. No. She's learned from her past mistakes.
Exactly. And I'm Mom, why did you let me submit that terrible essay? She's I didn't know any better.
I thought it was good.
Exactly. Which is exactly, again, why you don't want your parents reading your essays, because they don't necessarily know. Right. My mom is I thought it was cute. And I'm I mean, if it's your kid, it probably is.
Yeah,
but,
of course it is. Everything they do is cute.
You want a great story to tell to convey that message for you. You don't want to be hammering the admissions department with A, boring things that they can already see on your transcript, and B, telling them a message instead of showing them through a story.
Yeah.
So anything where it's just, a flat repeat of your transcripts is terrible.
Big no.
Another thing you really want to avoid is, in the context of telling stories, you don't want to tell stories that are going to reflect you or other people in a negative light. And that's something I think to be very careful about. Again, goes back to this idea of what you think is funny may not be what the admissions department is funny, but stuff that happened at high school parties and whatever. Big no for transcript, for your admissions essay, excuse me. Things that are controversial, that might have been against school rules or anything like that.
Right.
You don't want to put that in there. Even if you really do think it was a great learning experience, which it might have been, you don't want it to end with you in detention.
About something else.
Yeah. Think about another one. Yeah. Anything that might reflect
something else.
Exactly. Anything that might reflect you in a bad light, or even reflect your peers in a bad light, you do not want to be having that in there.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And obviously also, references to drugs and alcohol, this should go without saying, but they do not belong in your college admissions essay.
Right.
And you'd be surprised how many students somehow think that that's going to be, offbeat or clever, but you just don't want to play that game with the admissions officers. Very, very risky.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I completely agree. Going back to college lists a little bit, how do you want to talk about that, touch on that a little bit more? Just how do students, how do they just start building one? I mean, it's so overwhelming for so many students.
So this is something that I could literally talk about for hours, but just in a sort of brief way. What I think that you really need to start thinking about as far as your college essays is you need a list first of safety schools, mid-range schools, and reach schools. Your safety schools are the ones where you are pretty sure that it is in the bag. Maybe you already know that they automatically accept a person with insert whatever ACT score is, and you have it. Maybe you already know that you have some family connection that's really going to work for you there. So you want your safety schools, and have a couple of those that they shouldn't be, schools where you're like, oh, this is a bad school. This should be a school you wouldn't mind going to.
Yep. You're going to be there for 3-4 years.
Yeah, exactly. It should be a school that you're pretty sure 90% is going to accept you, but you wouldn't mind going there. Then you want your mid-range schools, and those ones are going to be schools that you most likely will get into. You'd be like, yeah, if I were a betting person, I'd say they'll probably accept me. I'm in a good range for their ACTs, a good range for their grades. They have a major I want. But, they're not as sure of a bet. And then you want your reach schools. And those are your real, moonshot schools.
Right.
Schools where you're like, wow, that would be my dream. And obviously it's really hard to get into. Those are probably schools that everybody finds hard to get into, and there's a certain amount of luck involved in getting into them.
Yes.
It isn't just how great a student you are,
right,
how great your ACTs are, but you want to have a couple of those as well. Harvard at one point came to talk to my students in the Bronx and said, let us surprise you. And I thought that was a really great way of thinking about it. Harvard, I think, is a reach school for absolutely everybody in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it isn't even necessarily the right school for some people, but for sure, it is a reach school. And, if that is, if you have a place like Harvard that you absolutely want to go to, and, you're like, man, I don't think I'll get in, but, maybe.
There's a chance.
Yeah. I mean, maybe is what everybody says about a school like Harvard, which has, I think, a 5% admissions rate right now.
Super low, yeah.
Yeah, it's everybody's a maybe for a school like that.
Yes.
And, if you absolutely love it, give them a chance to surprise you.
Yeah, I like how they said that.
They did. It was a really positive message, and I think that some of our students even applied there afterwards. So
yeah, awesome. Did any get in? Do you know?
Unfortunately, they did not get into Harvard, but they got into some really other great schools, and
awesome.
And I think it showed them that all good schools really should have that kind of, logic behind them. Let us surprise you.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any other tips on how to prepare for college that you can give us, our listeners?
I would say try to do some college visits. That would be a good one. And I know that those can be cost prohibitive, especially when airplane travel is involved.
Yeah.
But it's good to sort of get a feel of a college by actually going there, if at all possible. Walk around the campus, talk to some students. You don't even need to do an overnight visit if that sounds completely weird and stressful. Just even spending a day walking around the campus is probably completely fine.
Starting as a sophomore, maybe?
Literally,
maybe if you're in the area.
As freshmen and sophomores. I remember visiting UVA as a freshman because my cousin was about to be a senior. And so, his...
Might as well.
Yeah, my aunt was like, want to come along on his college tour? I was like, sure, sounds good. And I went, and I decided it probably wasn't the right school for me.
Yeah.
But it gave me a sense of what kind of school wasn't. And that's actually, I think, a great point to mention. Visiting colleges can be really helpful, not just for realizing what does work for you and what kind of school you do want, but what kind of school does not work for you.
Absolutely.
And that is, I think, even a more valuable lesson. I went to the University of Pennsylvania to visit my cousin there, a different cousin there at one point. And I think it was a weekend where they were having a major football game. And it was really, there were like kind of a lot of parties. It was very, fraternity and sorority oriented. And for some people, that is a perfect environment. For me, I would have found that like extremely stressful. I was not interested in like a lot of Greek life. Very overwhelming.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what? This is a really nice school, obviously great academically, but it's not for me. And I didn't apply there.
Yeah.
So
check that off the list.
And didn't apply to schools like it either. I was like, okay, I think I'm realizing
Right.
I don't want a school that has like Greek life as a major component. And some people love Greek life. My cousin loved Greek life.
Right. But that's an even better
wasn't at
insight.
that. Yeah, and
so
that's
cross those
fine.
kind of schools off the list.
To realize what kind of school you don't want to be at is as valuable, if not more, as to realize what kinds of schools you do want to be at. So it helps you narrow it down.
Very good. Oh, Lana, thanks so much for coming on our show.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun to be here.
I feel like we've had so much useful information.
I hope so. Thank you. And absolutely, feel free to come talk to me about any of this. This is stuff that everybody needs a little bit of guidance to go through.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alana.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. Join us next week as we talk with one of our master level tutors about what works for her students and what doesn't work so well for others. And as always, if you enjoy listening to our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and make sure to give us a positive review. If you need more tips surrounding the college prep process, visit our website at getsmarterprep.com. See you next week.